Welcome to the Green Wisdom Health Podcast with Dr. Stephen and Janet Lewis, where you will learn about natural solutions to common ailments. And now, here are your hosts, Dr. Stephen and Janet Lewis.
Welcome to the Green Wisdom Health Show. I'm Janet Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Lewis.
And we are here to cheer you up during this holiday season if you're not already cheery, and educate you a little bit about adrenal fatigue or the holiday blues. So if you're beginning to get tired through all of this holiday season, you're not alone. There's many people going through it with you, and some people are having a hard time staying up. So Dr. Lewis is going to educate us a little bit today about adrenal fatigue or holiday blues, whichever one it is. We're going to figure out with you which one you may be having. So, Dr. Lewis, would you like to tell us how can we know the difference on whether or not we're just tired from all of it, or if it's the holiday blues or the holidays are making us tired?
I'm tired just listening. Have you ever noticed, folks, this is the only time she ever lets me talk? That's really not true, but it sounded good at the time.
He loves talking, and I let him talk all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty complicated thing, and, I'm going to go down a lot of rabbit trails, so, thanks for that. People that love my rabbit trails. How do you link holiday blues with adrenal fatigue? Well, one of the reasons is the adrenals have to do with dealing with stress. And we measure cortisol on our labs. It can be too high or too low. It needs to be just right, like the story about the porridge.
The three bears. Yes.
Is that what it was? Three bears?
Goldilocks, yes.
Okay. She's younger than me. She still remembers. One of the things, I'm going to kind of rabbit trail here right off the bat. We do a lot for adrenal glands, and it's very, very common for us to find people with very low cortisol or adrenal fatigue. Had one today. The guy's got cancer with a possible metastasis into the bones. It did not surprise me to see his cortisol went really low because his adrenal glands are tired from fighting all the stress that his body's been going through. But one of the things, let me jump the gun, something you don't hear about very much is something called pregnenolone, and I take about 60 milligrams a day.
What is pregnenolone for people out there wanting to know?
Actually, it's a precursor to DHEA, and DHEA goes along with cortisol. It's put out by the adrenal glands, and when you get stressed, pregnenolone seems to be kicked in the rear, and it actually has a higher concentration in the nervous tissue than anywhere in the bloodstream, like up to 10 times higher in the nervous tissue as in the brain. Some of the things that causes adrenal stress. So I'm saying about pregnenolone, if you have adrenal stress and we put you on something for adrenals, which we'll talk about, you probably ought to just take the pregnenolone anyway, and I do. So it makes me young, rich, and good looking, or something like that, depending on who you listen to. But most of the causes of adrenal stress are people that are constantly angry, putting their body into that adrenaline rush, depression. So it's kind of hard to tell, does depression cause adrenal fatigue, or is it vice versa? Excessive exercise. I see people do this quite often. They're going to exercise their way into good health, and they actually hurt themselves. People that go to sleep late, chronic inflammation, which is anybody, I think, that eats grain, dairy, or processed dairy, mostly grain, but that's going to keep your GI tract very inflamed. Temperature extremes, and it's not like it's hot, it's cold, and people say, well, you're going to catch cold. It's because you already have a less than optimal immune system, and it stresses it out too much. Of course, I'd get in trouble as a kid. My mother, sweetest mother in the world, but she'd say, put on your shoes, you're going to get your feet cold. And, it may be 30, 40 degrees out there, and I wanted to go barefoot. And she says, come out of the rain. If you get wet, you'll get a cold. I said, well, Mom, I get wet in the bath every day, and that was not the right thing to say.
I was thinking outside of the box, even back then. You know, I got that same story, but I never thought about I was in the tub. So there you go. You always think one step further.
Yeah, well, it got my butt beat a few times too. Poor digestion, which is most people. I think I'm outside the box, about to get corralled in now. Poor digestion, which is most people. If you have gas, belching, bloating, acid reflux, it's not usually too much acid. It's eating the wrong things, which almost all the time is grains to start with, and you're not digesting them well. So you need digestive enzymes and probably probiotics. It can be low blood sugar or high blood sugar / metabolic syndrome that we just talked about / diabetes. And, you know, I talked about anger. People that are full of fear and guilt have a tendency to have blown out adrenal glands. And so does that cause the holiday blues? And it's worse during the holidays because there's more stress on us. Those stresses may be too much sugar, too much alcohol.
Financial.
Yeah, you know, yeah. And I tell people, you know, sipping a little bit of wine before dinner's fine, unless you have your in-laws there, and then gulping is appropriate. So, okay,
I'm not even going to bite on that one. Just go ahead.
I got a look on that one. Fear and guilt is a pretty bad thing to deal with, and that's stuff that we put on ourselves. I don't know if it's learned behavior. I think it's learned behavior. And there are certain people that seem to have more fear and guilt. And, you know, we deal with that in different ways. I don't think alcohol is a good way to deal with it, but that's self-inflicted. When you deprive yourself of sleep, that is terrible, and that puts a lot of stress on your adrenals. And there's plenty of studies that say you can't lose weight if you're sleep deprived. And I don't think just sleeping more is a perfect way to lose weight, but it would help for your body to rest and decrease some of the inflammation. People that have undergone major surgeries are used to that. It's like, oh, their body just gets blown out, chronic infections, toxic exposure. Most people don't know when they're exposed, but we're all exposed to that. You know, the chlorine cleaners, when they spray for pesticides, most of the building materials in your house and in your building are toxic. So you have to kind of ramp up the nutritional value to allow your body to deal with it. So I've gone through anger, fear, and guilt. So let's just talk about worry and anxiety. Sometimes people have anxiety attacks, and well, we've got some really good, effective products for that. And that kind of breaks the cycle nutritionally to allow your body to have a different physiological response. But again, sometimes, many times, this is self-inflicted by the way you think, and you're thinking and responding incorrectly.
Or stinking thinking. Is that what it's called?
That's right. Stinking thinking. It sounds like Zig Ziglar. A friend of mine told me a long time ago, says, you know, Stephen, you worry too much about everything, because I was a people pleaser and, had a little bit of the fear and guilt more than I do now. He said, if you don't want the devil at your party, quit inviting him. And I said, what do you mean? He says, you worry too much. And you know what? He's absolutely right. So now I live my whole life outside the box. People that are overworked and strain themselves physically and or mentally. And I hate to say it, but Janet and I are kind of guilty of that. We do take off more time than we used to. This last year has been somewhere close to, oh my God, incredible. The business has grown like crazy. Janet got the RV of her dreams and the driver of her dreams, and we spend a lot more time on the road because we have, Janet has figured out a way to decrease the stress and still give very, very good service. So it's like Eddie called me one time. Eddie's from up around Chicago. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm on vacation. He said, well, I don't mean to interrupt you. I said, no, I'm fine. I love talking to people, even on vacation. I was in Colorado, I think, last time I talked to Eddie. Chronic pain. People that say, for example, have fibromyalgia. Of course, that can be a side effect of having the adrenal exhaustion. And then here's one that most people don't really realize, but it's malabsorption. So you can eat the right stuff, and you have to take a lot of really good supplements, but your body just doesn't absorb as efficiently as it should. And goes back to severe allergies can create adrenal fatigue, which goes back to usually it's, well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but poor digestion, needing digestive enzymes, needing to stay away from mostly grain. You know, if you never ate another grain, you'd probably be better off. And I do eat a little bit, but I'm very careful about it. So, think about that. So if you do the pregnenolone, and I think 30 milligrams at least, I take 60, and that will help with the DHEA. The DHEA is an androgen, or functions as an androgen, which is a building steroid, and it converts in a man to testosterone, to a woman less so, but somewhat so. And it's a precursor, DHEA is a precursor to estrogen. So it reverses immune system suppression, which is usually caused by excessive cortisol levels. And if you keep that long enough, then it goes into, the adrenals can't keep up. Then they go into fatigue or exhaustion. So it improves your resistance against viruses, bacteria, yeast, parasites, food allergies, environmental toxins or sensitivities to those, and improves your resistance to cancer. And that's just DHEA. Folks, we like to measure it on lab, and it's really, really best if you have the levels that would equal a healthy 30-year-old, no matter how old you are. And mine tested at 455, which is flagged high, especially considering my age, but I feel about half my age. It just takes supplements to pull that off. And Janet says I act way too young for her, but that is created by the supplements itself and somewhat the child attitude, but the DHEA and pregnenolone help. So consider that.
When you talk about those levels on a lab, some people out there probably have had their DHEA tested. Does it mean that because it came in the range, does that mean that's where it needs to be?
No, and it changes from lab to lab, the reference intervals. It changes a lot. Somebody my age, the top end is 188. And it's like I tested at 455 and I feel great. If I kept it down at the range of 188 or below, I'd feel terrible.
Well, are those ranges based on people not having it to start with? Is that kind of where they're getting those ranges?
Bingo. They're getting it off a sick or suboptimally healthy or lack of healthy population. So if you get it, usually a woman has to have 200 and up, no matter what her age is. Men don't usually do great until it hits a 300, and that's because precursor to testosterone.
See, and most people don't even really know what DHEA does. I know when we run our lab, that's one of our 12 panels that we run. It's no, it's not. I take that back. It's an add-on test that we run with the hormones on a man or woman. And people go, why are you running DHEA? I just want to know my testosterone. And it's just what Dr. Lewis said. You have to have that to make it. And it is also very important in adrenals. Isn't that right? Making cortisol or not?
Well, in a big way, the effects of high cortisol, and that's being stressed long term, are pretty bad. And then it eventually gives up. It gets tired. It gives out. So you just kind of have to watch that. I don't think it would be wise to treat yourself for suspected adrenal fatigue unless you have it on lab. I don't think that's wise at all. Some of the associated problems you can have if your adrenals are impaired: unexplained hair loss, irritability. Men, if your wife is irritable, now would be a good time to keep your mouth shut.
Women don't care if they're irritable. They care if they have hair. Seriously.
Notice the irritable tone there.
That's exactly right, but I have hair.
Apprehensive, yeah. Excessive hunger, indigestion, moments of confusion. But anytime we give you a list, people say, I have that, therefore it is whatever we're talking about. Be careful about doing that, because moments of confusion can be many, 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 many other things. It's just one symptom that may go with several dozen different diagnoses. So don't just jump to the conclusion. Tendency toward inflammation, mental depression, nervousness, low body temperature, which you think that's thyroid, but the thyroid and adrenals work hand in hand. You know, they're walking down through the park holding hands. You can't fix one without fixing the other, and you can't have one stressed without it adversely affecting the other. Osteoporosis, poor memory, poor resistance to infections, allergies of all types, which can be food allergies or airborne allergies, dry skin or thin skin. Oh, no, you associate that with the thyroid. But again, what's the adrenals doing? If the thyroid's stressed, so are the adrenals. Intolerance to alcohol. Well, let's get personal there. I really have never been able to drink much, which is probably not a bad thing. 2 drinks and I'm pretty much overdosed. Chronic headaches, PMS. I think PMS stands for putting up with men's stuff. I'm not sure.
That's right.
Low blood pressure, because the adrenals can't have that response. One of the tests you can do to see if you have adrenal fatigue is if your blood pressure is 120/80 and you stand up suddenly and your blood pressure drops, 5 to 10 points on either direction or both, you probably have adrenal fatigue. And that's a side effect of many drugs. I shouldn't say drugs, medications, standing up and getting dizzy.
That's a good point, because I know when I go to the dentist, or used to go to the dentist, they'd take my blood pressure and it'd be like 115/75. And they were like, oh, your blood pressure is so good. And I thought, then why do I feel so bad? And it was the adrenals. Yeah. And now that the adrenals are corrected, my blood pressure is 120/80. And, I'm in the normal range. So that blood pressure business being really low is not always a good sign that you're really healthy.
Yeah, and people say, well, blood pressure being low would be a good thing. Well, think about this for just a moment. If your heart doesn't beat hard enough, it does not perfuse the arteries down to the capillaries, so it cannot get the blood in the places it needs because the pressure is maybe not high enough. Now, I'm not saying I like high blood pressure, but you have to have a balance there. But you have to think the second, third, fourth step down there. So if people lower your blood pressure because it tends to be too high, you may not be getting the blood flow to areas that you want it to go. And that's one of the reasons why the high blood pressure medication will, in many cases, impede a man's ability to get an erection, because you don't get enough blood flow to areas that, used to be exciting. And now it's
that require blood flow.
Yeah. Long gone to Lufkin, as the old song was.
That's a Texas saying.
Well, that was a song.
In Texas.
The only hit that band ever had. But, there's a lot of different things you have to think about, and that's why it's better to let us do the low-cost lab work, because that's a sympathetic mode of your autonomic nervous system. And, if it's causing a rapid release of, say, the adrenaline, that's the fight or flight hormone. And that comes out of your adrenal medulla, and that's the inner portion of your thyroid gland. So it really, really gets complicated, and we can help you find the simplest answer to get your health back.
Yeah, actually, autoimmune disorders can cause adrenal fatigue as well.
Or adrenal fatigue can lead to autoimmune. Either way.
So
good point.
You don't know whether or not you have an autoimmune problem. We keep throwing all this out here, and you're probably going, I don't know if I have all this. My doctor runs like 1 or 3 panels of lab. I tell him what's wrong. He runs a panel on that, and they're done. That's why we don't guess at what's wrong. We like to see the whole picture, and that's why our minimum lab panel that we recommend is 12 different lab panels. We do it across the United States. It's local to you at a Quest Diagnostic Lab. It's very simple to do. You go online, fill out a health survey to greenwisdomhealth.com. Based on that, Dr. Lewis will recommend a lab panel that he suggests, and it's usually the 12-panel lab. Many times he'll want you to add the female or male hormones to it because he wants to get a whole picture. So then you're talking about 15 different panels of lab or 16 different panels of lab, but we do it at cost so that we're not guessing and we can see everything. And in that is the cortisol that he's talking about for the adrenals. Many times we can see the CBC shows patterns of like an autoimmune problem. You can suspect that. You can see 5 different parts of the thyroid. The DHEA is talking about, do you have that to make hormones? Dr. Lewis gives you a functional medicine report with everything listed. So it's not just him telling you that. You can see it in green and red and yellow markers of good, bad, and ugly, and maybe in between.
Yeah, you can read about it for those of you that like to have more knowledge.
And he gives you a recommended supplement sheet, and he goes over all of it for free. So I think right now that lab panel is running $298. So that might be a really great gift to give someone that you're hearing maybe this podcast and you're thinking, hey, we got somebody that we don't know if it's the holiday blues or they're just really stressed out, or it could be a spouse that you don't know what to get them. And a lab panel gifted to them would be a great start. So start with the comprehensive if you're not knowing which one to pick.
And I didn't get much into the holiday blues. Let me do that very quickly. One of the things I like to talk about is Utah, and we know that's a pretty clean, I don't know the word for it, but they're very generally,
state.
Pardon?
It's a clean state.
Yeah, very clean people, very nice, but since they're very heavily Mormon, they don't do caffeine or alcohol. And so what happens is, because they don't deal with their stress with stimulants or depressants like alcohol, they actually eat more sugar. And that's what happens during the holidays. And the more sugar can create adrenal exhaustion, lower your immune system because it lowers your zinc. And, you know, just because in Utah they do that, they lead the nation in the use of antidepressant drugs.
Well, isn't it true as well that lower vitamin D levels can cause the holiday blues?
Yeah, Brandy, the lady that's packing your boxes most of the time, she said, why don't you talk about seasonal affective disorder? Well, usually our low vitamin D is going lower in the wintertime because of the way the sun's shining and the angle. And the lower vitamin D will make you less and less peppy. You know, when it rains for a few days, we're just dying for the sun to come out. So, yeah, vitamin D is very important, incredibly important. And people tell me every day, but I'm taking vitamin D. And I look on their lab and I said, well, it's not working. But it says, I said, yeah, but
they're buying a 5,000 IU over-the-counter vitamin D, and we'll run their lab, and it hasn't moved a thing.
Yeah, 93% true. Yeah, you know, there's about 7 out of 100 that's actually usable. So be careful with the quality that you get.
Right. We do want to make sure we take the time to address a couple of questions here and also inspire you with the right products to take after we've depressed you with things you might have.
Doesn't depress people. That excites them because they have hope or maybe they can get their friends and family and spouse well to make their life less stressed. I'm not sure. It's a possibility.
Yeah. Okay. So on the adrenal fatigue,
right.
If you really are really lethargic and having a hard time getting around, we recommend a product called Adren-All because it feeds the adrenals and helps give you energy. It's better than having coffee or an energy drink and way better for you.
Sometimes she goes from preaching to getting personal. Let's talk about the coffee. It's got a lot of things that your body can use to adapt to the stress, like vitamin A, C, E, niacin, B6, which is important to let the neurotransmitters cross the blood-brain barrier to make you happy. The good B12, pantothenic acid. But it's got the bovine adrenal concentrate, Eleuthero root extract, which is a huge adaptogenic herb. It's really good. Rhodiola, Schisandra, licorice root. It's just really, really good.
Basically, it will counteract the negative effects of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one that we recommend for the holiday blues or somebody that has depression and anxiety is something called CereVive, because it's formulated to support a positive mental outlook and a relaxed, focused state, because it includes amino acid precursors and bioactive nutrients that support healthy levels of neurotransmitters such as Lord, I hate this word, aminobutyric acid.
Say that twice.
GABA, serotonin, dopamine, and neuroepinephrine. Say it, Dr. Lewis. You're better at that.
She knows what to put you on, though. There's no doubt about it. But there's so many things that needs to be dealt with. St. John's wort is good, and most people don't know it's antiviral also.
But it helps memory, focus, energy levels, and healthy sleep cycle.
Ginkgo, elderberry, there's so many herbs, but most of the real medical research says that we're low in B vitamins, and that will help us not just with adrenal exhaustion, but depression and magnesium always. You always have to think about magnesium and essential fatty acids.
But we have just a few minutes left, and we do have a couple of questions I want Dr. Lewis to get to really quick because we promised him that we would. One of them is on diverticulitis. They would like to know what the protocol for diverticulitis would be.
Well, when we talk about our natural solutions to common ailments, that is not in lieu of medical care. Diverticulitis can be very, very dangerous. So, don't rule out seeing a good GI doctor. But naturally, what I do, because they were checking my coronary arteries in my heart and found diverticulitis. I didn't know my heart was that close to my guts, but they were checking all over the place. Main thing is probiotics. You can do a lot of those, and that's always a good idea for many, many things, including the holiday blues. Different kinds of fiber. You want some soluble, some insoluble, like oat, bran, psyllium, ground flax seeds are very, very good because it bulks up. The B complex that we talk about, and because B is actually needed to create the enzymes, although I would add digestive enzymes and proteolytic enzymes, the ones that break down things, and essential fatty acids. So I don't have any problems as long as I do that. Have no problems whatsoever. And then always use glutamine, which is in our GlutaShield, and that heals the lining of the GI tract. And
our most favorite new one now, which is SBI Protect, which really seems to be making a big difference with that.
Mm-hmm. With many people with IBS, Crohn's, and celiac, et cetera, et cetera.
And then Rob, if you could just touch on this real quickly for Rob. He's getting ready to go in for surgery. He's been doing a lot of our probiotics, and they're going to be putting him on an antibiotic before the surgery. He's worried that it's going to kill all of his probiotics. So what would you say to that?
Well, sometimes you have to do, the medical part, and, I think you should follow your surgeon's advice on that. I think it's very good to get off most supplements 7 to 10 days before the surgery because, and your doctor may or may not know this, but you don't want to be so jacked up that your liver detoxifies the anesthesia. Most people never think about that. They only think about, well, it could thin your blood. Don't worry, Rob. We can clean you up. And since you've spent years and years and years doing our stuff, you're already stronger and you're going to bounce back much more quickly than anybody else that would have that particular surgery. And I've seen your picture on Facebook. You're good looking anyway, so you'll bounce back, and we'll put you on some really high dose probiotics.
Which we do have a really high dose one for people that come off of antibiotic use. It's just for pulling you out of a crisis.
Yeah,
So.
It's 225, although it's made at over 400, so you're getting a lot for what you're spending. We'll clean you up, Rob, but follow your doctor's instructions on that and get off my stuff at least 7 days before.
And other than that, just be happy. So we hope you guys have learned something again on our show. We hope your holiday season is being blessed. We look forward to talking with you again next year and educating you. And if you have questions, please shoot us an email or go on Dr. Lewis's Shooting Straight Facebook page and ask questions there, and we'll be happy to address them on our next show. You guys have a very blessed season.
Once again, our show has come to an end, but your hope in your health is only beginning. If you or a loved one are in need of a different outcome and are waiting for a brighter future, take the first step and go to our website and fill out the health survey. Please don't keep us a secret. If you know someone that could benefit from this podcast, please share this show with your friends and family. You are only one step away from a life worth living.